What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Turn the Jets podcast. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPod11 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Will Parkinson NFL on YouTube. Great friend of the show. Mike Renner is joining us. He is a diehard Jets fan because we have Aaron Rodgers. He'll be joining us here. We're going to talk some NFL draft. We're going to talk a little bit of Jets offseason, kind of some of the hot topics, I guess, right now with the Jets. And we're about a month out, or almost exactly a month out from round one kicking off and peak of the offseason. Mike, how we doing? How we feeling?
Doing fantastic. Excited that it's, less than a month away from the draft here now.
I know. We're in a good spot. We kind of, wave one of free agency. I would say wave two is kind of mostly over at this point now. We're going to start to see a lot of these vets that every offseason don't want to do OTAs, and a lot of them don't want to do fully training camp. So they'll wait to sign. We'll get some, Jadeveon Clowney was in with the Jets last week. He's a name that has always waited a long time. I know there's a lot of positive moves there, but I expect that to get that done eventually, unless Carolina Godfather offers him. Regardless, I did want to talk some Jets offseason and kind of go into the draft. Before we go to the draft, general feeling on some of the moves they've made. They've obviously added a bunch of offensive linemen. They've added a receiver. They've added back a quarterback. They've addressed all the needs pretty much on paper. What have you thought of the moves so far?
I think it was all necessary, right? You're all in this year, and maybe next year too. But truthfully, this year is where you have to. So you had to make some short-term moves, and I think especially what they did offensively. Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses, Mike Williams. Those are not guys that are going to be there. Even in 2025, like I would expect. Like that could be 1 year. This is it, all or nothing. So I think that's what they had to do. And for for the position they were in, I think the names they got were about as good as you could have done, good as you could have hoped for. So it put them in a position where heading into the draft, it's not like, oh, pick 10, we have to draft offensive tackle. Oh, pick 10, we have to trade up for one of these wide receivers. Now, while I think that'd be awesome if they did, they're in a really flexible situation where they haven't pigeonholed themselves to, maybe use a top 10 pick on someone that may not be the best value at that point in time.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page as you. I want to get into that a little bit. I want to ask you just kind of a general question. Obviously, watch Rodgers up close in person for a really long time, and some really good Packer teams, some teams that weren't as good, but they still were better than a lot of the Jets teams the last 10 years. Generally speaking, where have you seen Rodgers kind of be most successful? I know there's a lot of the debate, and this is going to kind of shape what we're going to talk about with pick 10 and stuff is, his best supporting cast. Was it always having the best offensive line, not as good weapons? Was it kind of the opposite? Where have you seen, from your perspective, where do you feel like what's the best formula to kind of get peak Rodgers? And again, we don't know as much as we're going to know with Rodgers until we see it, but generally speaking.
To me, Rodgers was always at his best. I think it's like two best years, 11 and 14, were when he had a full complement of wide receivers, where it was everyone was involved in the progression, and there was no one that he was really turning down consistently. So, and those also were, back when he also had functioning tight ends or good tight ends in the offense as well. So I think that's what you want from Rodgers. Now, obviously, easier said than done to get that. That 2011 team had an insane roster of wide receivers when he was really going off. So it's like, the Jets probably aren't going to get to that level. But to me, that's when Rodgers, because he can mitigate, he gets the ball out of his hands quickly. He's a quick decision maker when that is the case. And so really not having, anyone in your 5 out that he doesn't trust is probably when he was at his best. But I will say, at this point in his career, with the injury that he just suffered last year, it's hard to ignore the offensive line, right? It's hard to say, we're good there, even with the additions they've made.
Yeah, look, you made a good point there. I felt like last year, and again, it's small sample size of practices during camp and the one preseason game. It felt like he trusted Garrett Wilson and trusted Conk and on short yardage stuff. And then it was kind of like sometimes trusted Lazard, sometimes when Cobb's in there, but definitely didn't trust McCole Hardman, definitely didn't trust some of these other guys. And again, it's hard to blame him. He's never played with these guys, but outside of Garrett, it felt like, I don't know, maybe he trusted Corey Davis a little bit, but again, Corey was kind of in and out. It just felt like it was kind of Garrett or Conk last year during camp. And after that, it was like, I don't know. You got to have more than that. You have to.
Yeah. And the addition of Mike Williams this year, we'll see what he has left in the tank after his injury. But I do think it's still a position where, whether it is tight end, whether it is wide receiver, where that's probably where I'm looking at first. Because Any offensive tackle after any offensive lineman in this draft, relying on any rookie offensive lineman to come in and produce, it's not going to be the same. As the track record just at that position is nowhere near what it is at receiver, tight end coming in early into the league.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I think again, it obviously eases the concerns if you get Morgan Moses should be healthy. I mean, he's a guy who played through a torn pec last year and like never misses snaps, so not worried about him. Simpson's a guy that you hope stays similar form to what he was last year. Again, he's your worst lineman, like you're in a decent spot. Tyron Smith's the one where look, he's an All Pro last year, and he never misses the playoffs and in the important games, but he's not going to practice a whole lot and early in the year, he's probably going to have a hamstring or probably going to have a lower back or a neck or whatever. I think the discourse of having those guys at least as your penciled-in starters makes the ability to draft a rookie offensive lineman more feasible, that they could sit ideally in the beginning and then they can kind of fill in if it's a Fontenot or Fuaga or Olu, whoever it is. I just don't think Joe Alt's going to be there at 10. I mean, I could be totally wrong, but I'd be pretty surprised. Although I guess people think JC Latham could go 5 now, and that'd be a bit of a reach for me. So I want to kind of ask you about 10. Let's just play out the couple of scenarios here. I want to finish with trade up and trade back last. I want to start with if they just sit at 10. The most popular guys you kind of hear connected to the Jets is Bowers, Fuaga, Fashanu, like that tier. That's tier after Alt, that offensive lineman or Bowers. In that direction, I feel like you'd lean Bowers just based on kind of what you were just mentioning there. And what do you kind of make of the player? Because he's weirdly polarizing for an insane talent.
I like Bowers a lot, man. I think he's probably, I think Kyle Pitts, I probably had a higher grade on coming out because of what his ceiling could be. But I think Bowers is a higher floor than even Kyle Pitts was coming out as tight end prospect. And going back to kind of like the Rodgers conversation and why I love the fit of Bowers there. If all three of the wide receivers, the top 3 wide receivers are gone, which I assume they will be, I would take Bowers. I would take Bowers over this tackle class for the New York Jets because with Aaron Rodgers, you almost have to convince him to throw over the middle of the field. You almost have to have a guy he trusts wholesale who's not going to hang him out to dry over the middle of the field. Like that was like kind of the biggest thing over the course of his career. That's where he needs guys he trusts. And Bowers, just his tape, his consistency, his route running ability, his hands, it's going to build that trust right away, like nearly immediately with Aaron Rodgers. I'd be very surprised if he didn't. That's just how good he is. So that's why I love that fit. And think he's a guy who can even like see the field with Tyler Conklin, even if you want to get him reps too. So I do think that Bowers is, I don't want to say getting underrated. I get why you can sour on him. A lot of teams just don't feature a tight end, and that's, he's not going to provide value if that's the case. But with this Jets team, I think that's something that they're desperately missing, could desperately use. So that's why I love that.
Yeah, look, you could very easily go 12 personnel, Mike Williams, Garrett Wilson, Conk, Brees, and Brock Bowers. And that's a pretty fucking good unit right there, yes. Like right away. And I think, the Sam Laporta discussion, I think almost quiets some of the concerns just because we saw a guy like Laporta last year come in and, light the league on fire. And, I know Kyle Pitts, everyone was disappointed with his rookie year. Still 1,000 yards as a rookie tight end. It's not like he's some horrible player. And I think Bowers moves a little more functionally well than Pitts does. I know Pitts has got the measurables, but kind of like sometimes like clunkily runs a 4.4. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, well, so what I go back to with Bowers is that he was on a team with Adonai Mitchell and Ladd McConkey, 2 receivers who might go in the first round. He was the guy that produced. I think that's the thing you usually worry about with tight ends. And it's like same thing with like Jatavion Sanders this year and why I'm not like super high on him. He was the 3rd receiving weapon in an offense. Like you're drafting a guy who was far and away the 3rd receiving weapon in offense. Why would you take that guy highly to be like the 3rd weapon in your offense? If you draft a tight end, you want him to be a guy that you can feature. And with Bowers, you've already seen that. He was the focal point of Georgia's passing game since his freshman year. So that the thing that you worry about most, I think Bowers has already alleviated that and shown that, in numerous games this year when he's getting double teams, when defenses were putting their attention on him. That's a unique thing that you can't say. Shoot, I don't think you can say about like almost any tight end prospect. I think Pitts maybe belongs in that conversation, but it just doesn't happen. The team's game plan around a tight end, and that's why Bowers, I think, is just a different cat.
Yeah, when you're one of the 2 or 3 best players, let alone offensive players, on a team that people argue is the best team they've ever seen, usually that guy's pretty damn good. I want to ask you quickly, obviously, about this tackle class, and I want to talk about trading up and trading back. This tackle class, I feel like is very good, but it's very right tackle heavy, and it's very right tackle, right guard heavy. And the reason I bring that up is if I'm the Jets, and again, this is just a personal preference thing, but if I'm going to draft a tackle in the top 10, I'd like that guy to be my franchise left tackle. Not saying right tackle is not important and not right guard and left guard. I get all these guys get paid. I'm not saying they don't. But like, I don't know. Ideally, I'd like to have a left tackle for the next 10 years as opposed to like, I feel like right tackle, you can kind of make guys a little bit more right sided. Um, that's why I have a little bit of a hard time with tackle at 10, just because, okay, you take Fuaga, like, that's great. He'll replace Morgan Moses, but Morgan Moses probably could play 3 or 4 more years based on the way his durability and stuff like that. Tyron Smith's the guy you're probably replacing at 25 or 26. I don't know. Am I crazy here with that? I worry a little bit. Fontanu, Fashanu, and all are the guys that like naturally played left tackle last year, but maybe a Marius Mims. I don't know.
So yeah, I'm of the opinion that the only tackle I draft at 10 if I was the Jets, assuming obviously Joe Alt's not going to be there, is Olu Fashanu. Because to me, he's the one in this class that projects as a high-end pass protecting left tackle for the future. Like, not to say he's for sure going to be that. I'm super high on him. I do think he has a really high floor in pass protection based off what I've seen in his 2 years of college football. But that's what I'm looking for because, like, I think what you said there about the durability between Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith, which one are you more likely to see miss a few games this year? Just based off of history, is probably Tyron Smith. So what are you looking for? That's probably what you're looking for in terms of immediate impact. And then again, with top 10 pick, you want that guy who's a high-end pass protector. And so if not, to me, the difference between, J.C. Latham from Alabama, Amarius Mims from Georgia, Taliesin Fuaga from Oregon State, it's not worth drafting one at 10 when you could trade back and probably get one of those guys also at pick 17, 19, wherever it may be in this first round. Because there are a ton of them. But as you said, a lot of them are right tackles only, the guys you mentioned. So to me, it's Olu and then Troy Fautanu to a lesser degree, the Washington tackle, but he's not a guy I'm going to bat as top 10 pick. He's another guy that you could probably trade back for and get later on. So to me, if it's Bowers or Olu is I think the dream scenarios if you're sticking at 10 and say both those guys are off the board, I'd rather trade back than just take one of those right tackles right away.
Yeah, that's what I was going to kind of. Obviously, we don't talk too much, but trading back is tough because you need a trade partner to want to come up. It's really going to depend on how these quarterbacks go and how desperate's Denver going to get, how desperate Minnesota. Is New Orleans going to freak out and try to come up for a tackle? Is it Jacksonville coming up for corner, coming up for receiver, coming up like? There's a lot of teams that you could go back, but I think trading back sounds good in theory. And again, if the Jets did it, like you got to hit on those picks still, and if you're doing it to get a second round pick, and you're probably still taking a tackle. I'm not sure. I want to be aggressive, and that's just maybe I'm crazy here, but like if the Chargers are really going to be open for business at 5, which they should be, by the way, the roster needs a lot of help. Jim Harbaugh's locked in there for forever. You have a new GM. That's like the classic. We're going to probably competitively suck this year, but like we have our quarterback and our coach. We just need picks and players. I don't know, like, why not go give up a second rounder next year or even a first rounder next year, whatever it's going to cost? I don't know. Marv, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall for the next 6-7 years is probably one of the 3 best cores in the league right away.
Yeah, I am of the opinion that I'm with you that if you kind of where they are at pick 10, depending on how obviously the board has fallen, if it starts 3 straight QBs, which I think everyone thinks at this point does, but if it starts that way, I would want to be aggressive to pick 5 because the only problem with that is you're probably bidding against teams behind them in Vikings, Broncos, whoever, Raiders who want to go up and get a quarterback, and then that price goes up. But I do think that I would want one of those top 3 wide receivers. Obviously probably not going to be Marvin, but Rome or Neighbors, just with kind of the certainty of those guys. And as you said, with Garrett Wilson, add another guy to that mix. It's just that can take you to a Super Bowl. You can flip from a defense team to an offensive team overnight. And so, I am with you there. I think these wide receivers are that much a game changers that I would be willing to go do what it takes to get that.
Yeah, I think the one scenario, I know people, 5 and even pick 6 and even pick 7, right? Like the Titans. If I'm the Titans, by the way, I'm going the highest ceiling possible tackle, knowing that I have the best offensive line coach in the league. And like, if anyone's going to get, I don't know, if you love J.C. Latham or you love Amarius Mims, like and you wanted to just take them probably over where they're drafted, but you said Amarius Mims got the best ceiling in the draft. I have Bill Callahan. Like, he's going to be the player we all hope he is. Like, they're the one team I think can take that guy. I don't think like the Jets or the Cardinals or these other teams, if Joe Alt's there, like, you just take him because he's going to be good right away. The one spot I think is the interesting trade up one for the Jets is 8. Atlanta's probably going defense. They should go defense.
Mm-hmm.
The Bears probably want a receiver at 9. If Rome's still on the board at 8, which I don't, who knows what's going to happen. That's the one, and it won't cost a ton. It seems like to move up. You're just jumping the Bears. You're probably giving up to 2 next year, or maybe it's a 3, whatever it is. Do you think that's another possibility? Like you said, maybe it's not Neighbors or Marv, but Rome is a pretty goddamn good player also.
Yeah, it's any of those 3, honestly. And now I'm higher on Malik and Marvin Harrison just in terms of what they can do from a ceiling perspective.
But they separate a little better too. It's part of it.
But I think Rome's super high, super polished. Like he might even be, not to say more NFL rated than Marvin Harrison, but more NFL rated than like Malik Neighbors in a number of ways, and maybe more versatile right out the gate in terms of the route tree he can run and be productive on. So yeah, I think any of those 3, I'd be willing to go pay the price for. And yeah, like you said, you got to jump the Bears. That's the problem. Is one of those 3's on the board for the Bears at 9. They're taking it. So,
yeah, no, look, and I know they're in a championship window, as you mentioned, right? You probably have Rodgers for 2 years. Could be 1, could be 3. I don't know. Rodgers is who he is.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in 2 years, let's say I don't know, maybe you make a title game, you don't win a title, but you've got a core now. And if you have one of those guys, your core of Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, and one of those 3 receivers, it's a really goddamn good core for a rookie quarterback to come into or whatever it may be. I think just the way the league's going, you need multiple weapons. You need multiple ways to attack a defense, inside, outside, et cetera. And like these guys are all flexible position wise. They run block well, which, I don't know if the Jets want to be this downhill running team somewhat with Rodgers and play action. Like Rome fits that perfectly. Like he's the physical big body guy. I want to transition to round 3. Obviously the Jets want a second round pick as we speak here. Let's just say they go with the offensive lineman at 10. Do you like some of these 3rd round potential receivers? I know it's difficult because I think Ricky Pearsall should go in the top 40, but people might not take him there, or Roman Wilson or Ladd McConkey should go in round 1, but maybe he goes in round 2, whatever, or it's a Xavier Legette or Malachi Corley and these other guys that probably could be round 4 guys, but might be round 2. You know what I mean? Like, I know it's hard to predict, but do you like this day 2 receiver class as well as day 1?
Yes, I think it's the most insane day 2 receiver class I've ever seen, which means, they can't all get drafted, right? So I think that will push down guys who on my board, on a lot of boards, have 2nd round, maybe even borderline 1st round type of grades. But just because there's like 15 of them, not everyone's going to be able to take them. So insane year, you need a wide receiver. And that means, 72, there's probably still going to be the guy I would love that I keep going back to for the Jets, someone like Javon Baker. Now, maybe not quite as polished, NFL ready, but just like some explosiveness to that receiver room with Mike Williams right now, possession guy, chain mover, not going to be a downfield threat, just someone else to stretch the field with Garrett Wilson on one side. So I think this 3rd round of wide receivers is going to produce guys that are coming in right away, going for 750 plus yards as rookies.
Yeah. Now I want to flip the conversation. Let's say they go pass catcher, which I think I'm more on the side of it. I know you are. Round 3 is a interesting spot for offensive linemen. Usually you're getting a project tackle or you're getting a probably ready-made guard or center, potentially, whatever it may be. I know Christian Haynes was the buzz of the Senior Bowl. I think he went from a guy that was a clear day 3, round 4 or 5 guy. And I know he's going to be a 3rd rounder, probably, I'm sure now. But is there any other names to you around pick 72 that are interior guys? Is it Cooper Beebe? Is it I don't know, Patrick Paul is on every PFF mock simulator at pick 72, and he's a popular one. Are those some names to you? I just feel like it's very different. Pass catcher right away, you expect immediate impact. Offensive line's a little bit more dicey in round 3.
Yeah, I'm not sure you get immediate impact, but again, you don't necessarily need it. It's going to be a depth guy. But I do really like this interior off the line class. So I think wide receiver, OT, QB are the 3 positions that are just insane classes. Don't get those every year. But then after that, I think interior offensive line is the next best position group, truthfully. There's just a lot of guys on day 2 And you mentioned Christian Haynes. I don't think he gets to pick 72 anymore. I think he ends up going second round actually after his testing, after his tape at Senior Bowl. And the guy I like in that range, who I haven't seen a ton of buzz on, but is Dominic Puny.
I was just gonna say that. No joke was about to be like
Kansas OT/guard. I mean, I love that he could, at that point in time, he could fill in a tackle because he played tackle this past year for Kansas, held up well enough in pass protection. Actually has like 34-inch arms. I know a lot of people see him on the interior because of his build, more of like an odd pear-shaped build, not necessarily your prototypical tackle build, but I think he could do it in a pinch, and especially, kind of where they are. If they, like I said, we're talking about the scenario where they go wide receiver, and so they don't have that depth to back up Tyron Smith should he go down. You could have a guy like him who has that flexibility to play inside outside. So that'd be the one name that I would be crossing my fingers for if I'm the Jets, pick 72, and that he falls to there.
I want to ask you about a couple more, just two other positions. I want to have two bigger picture questions here. The day 3 dart throw quarterback is like, if you mention the word dart throwing quarterback in day 3, everyone tells you how fucking awful all these guys are. And yes, most of them suck. Okay. Most of them are very bad. But there is a huge argument to be made. I know the argument was made. Connor and Joe did this in the show last night. The Jets would have loved to have Aiden O'Connell last year in round 4, or even more. You look at the Dak Prescott, Kirk, Brock Purdy, et cetera. You find your franchise guy and you have him on an insanely cheap deal for 4 years. For every one of those, the Jets also need a long-term backup for whoever it's going to be. And I don't know, is it Michael Pratt? Is it Jordan Travis? Those are the two names Jets Twitter love the most. And I don't blame them. Travis is a pretty no-brainer in terms of there's no way that dude's playing football this year. And if he does, it's not going to be till the second half of the year. You can kind of sneaky IR him, redshirt him, and he just sits in a quarterback room with Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor. And it's like, here's how you're a pro, recover. But you have no idea with the leg. That's a huge problem. But it's why it's a dart throw. Michael Pratt's a guy who I don't know how good he'll ever be, but he never will suck. I feel like he's like a classic Case Keenum spot start guy. Maybe in my head, that's how he comes to mind. Other than those two guys, or are those the two guys that if you took a quarterback at 111 or 112 or 134, I think is their other pick in the 4th round, is that realistic at this point? I don't know. They kind of made it clear they're going to add a quarterback. I just don't know when.
Yeah, Pratt's probably the only day 3 quarterback. That's assuming Michael Penix, Spencer Rattler, those guys go higher than day 3, right? Pratt's probably the only one on day 3 that I would even be intrigued by. There's some parallels to Brock Purdy in the 4-year starter, kind of turned around a program. I don't think he's that from an accuracy perspective. He's got kind of a longer release, but there's still a lot to like. Good arm, good downfield passer, and played a ton of football at this point. So he's probably the one. The other one I'd maybe mention, but it's just because of the athlete that he is, Joe Milton. Now, I'm not sure it's developed at QB. He's got a lot of development under his belt, 6 years of college, and still inaccurate as can be, but he's a heck of an athlete with a monster arm. And I mean, he's got to get to learn behind the best, strong arm quarterback in recent NFL history. So, like Aaron Rodgers, a good guy to learn from in terms of guy with arm talent. So just an intriguing dart throw, but the rest, Jordan Travis, I don't see as an NFL QB, to be honest.
Yeah, I know Connor Rodgers has some serious concerns with his arm, and it's if you watch him, he's a fun player. He's a great college player. I just don't know what you don't know what it's going to look like. And honestly, part of his appeal is his playmaking, and if his leg's never the same, it makes him even less likely to be good in the NFL. I agree with you. Milton's I wish you could put Joe Milton's arm on I don't know, any of these guys that we've always complained about strong arm, because if he's just standing there and can just let it rip, you're that's the nicest pass I've ever seen in my life.
Unbelievable.
On the move is tough. But I want to ask you one more question. This safety or interior defensive line class, not a lot. The Jets probably could use one guy at each spot. I don't know how they could address it throughout free agency. I think they should be all over Justin Simmons and Quandre Diggs and these guys. There's a 1-year stopgap or 2-year stopgap with Simmons. In the interior defensive line, it's Quinnen Williams, and they've been taking just dart throws. Javon Kinlaw, who I'm curious how long it's going to take him to pop off in a New York Reporter, and similar to what he did in San Francisco. Solomon Thomas. They just have a ton of former first round defensive linemen. Is there any day 3 guys or anything safety and defensive tackle that are even worth it? The kid out of Wake Forest I like, but again, I don't know. We're kind of picking hairs here.
Yeah, this safety class actually has some depth, but no real top end guys. No one I would even come close to the first round conversation at this point. I really liked some of these guys on tape more than I did like their testing. I like Cam Kinchins on tape, the Miami safety, and he runs a 4.65. I like Tyler Nubin on tape, the Minnesota safety, and his pro day numbers were pretty blah across the board. So it's kind of like whichever one of these guys falls. I think there's a lot of names, but so I don't think they're all going to go second and third round because of all these other strong positions we're talking about, whether it's OT, wide receiver, interior offensive line. I think those positions dominate day two. So one will fall, but I would probably have to get one at the top of the fourth. There's no like day three guy that I really love in the safety class. DT, I think day three is where it's actually most interesting to me. I don't think there's a lot of day two DTs in this class that I like, but once you get to day three, someone like Christian Boyd from Northern Iowa, I'm intrigued by what he looks like. Maybe Mason Smith from LSU if he doesn't go higher. Definitely like a high-end athlete who just underperformed at the collegiate level. Throwing some darts at those guys. But I'll also say that if at pick 10, they go Byron Murphy, I would not hate it. I would actually, for the Jets, to have him next to Quinnen Williams for the next 4 years, 5 years, I guess, the rookie contract. I think Byron Murphy's a special DT prospect. Maybe not quite to Quinnen level, but I think he's pretty darn close based off what I saw on tape down the stretch this past year.
Yeah, look, I think Jets Twitter would burn itself to the ground if they take anybody that's not a receiver or a tackle. But look, there's a lot worse players in this draft that you could have in your roster than Byron Murphy. I would love to. The only guy that I don't know what's going to happen to T'Vondre Sweat. Like, I genuinely have no idea. If you told me he went in the end of round one because some teams like this guy's just going to be he's a beast. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. If you told me he fell to round 5 because everyone's like, you're fat as shit and we don't really want to deal with this, I would understand it too. So he's a guy that I don't know. If early downs next year, the Jets had T'Vondre Sweat and Quinnen. Like, there's a lot worse things to have. He's one of those guys. I've never seen someone not weigh at the Senior Bowl. I've only been doing it for 3 or 4 years, but I've never seen that. But he weighed in and weighed great at the combine. So he's another guy, right? It's just like until we see it, we're going to have no idea where he ends up.
Yeah, I like his tape a lot. So I think it would have to be 72. Truthfully, like
it had to be third round pick. If you find it, this is why I want to lead this, because you're very familiar with David Bakhtiari. Is there a world in which you could see him saying, I want to go hang out with Aaron for a year. Hopefully I can be healthy. I'll go be me and Tyron Smith will try to play 17 combined games. Is there like an ego thing that could allow that to happen? Because if that happens, the Jets are probably going to have an all-pro left tackle if they can combine for 17. I just don't – is Bakhtiari like good with that at this point in his career? He probably still is a really good player. He just has not played football in 3 years.
Not until MetLife changes to grass.
Okay, that's the same way I feel.
Yeah.
And MetLife's not changing to grass, and it's nothing to do with the Jets. I would ask Giants fans why their owner is obsessed with concert money. They're going to have soccer games all summer on grass in MetLife, and then they watch the most important athlete in New York sports last year rupture their Achilles on shitty turf, and Jalen Phillips and all these guys. But change the fucking turf, please.
Yeah,
because that'd be a fun thing. David Bakhtiari is your swing tackle. I want to ask you two kind of larger questions here, and then as we wrap. Packers are an interesting. Obviously, your team. I wanted to ask you quickly about them. Are they just going to draft Cooper DeJean and just like because they're the Packers, or like what do they do there? Because I don't know. Like, I know they've had a lot of fun stuff at receiver and different things, and they could always use guys on defense. I don't know. Christian Watson's hamstrings are like 45 years old already. What do you want the Packers to do, let alone what they should do?
I honestly want them to trade back. I think they have more needs than kind of how they finished the year last year. I think the roster has depth concerns too at a number of different positions, and I would just love them in this class, especially like from that 25 to kind of 40 range. I see a lot of guys similarly, so I love them to trade back and just kind of, I know they're ready to have the Jets second round pick, but just load up there, because I think this day 2 of this class is also fairly deep, and especially at positions which they need, which are like lower value positions, safety, linebacker, probably interior offensive line, maybe an offensive tackle. but I think in this class, you can probably get one in the second round. So that's probably what I want most from them, is just to kind of hit all those positions, but trade back to do so, because I don't think there's any linebacker or safety that I'm drafting in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, if Peyton Wilson was not an injured player, he would not be a question mark. He'd be a true first round guy. But unfortunately, the injuries are what they are, and you're taking a huge risk to be
one ACL.
One ACL. The Dewan Blair of draft prospects. Shout out to Mr. No ACLs. I want to ask you quickly, Patriots and a Rodgers question. Patriots wise, I think it affects the Jets, obviously, and what they end up doing. They've been really vocal about like a lot of stuff, and I'm sure a lot of it's smoke and whatever. What are you doing at 3? Because there's a strong argument to be made. They should trade back. They need an entire roster overhaul. But then it's like the quarterback class next year does not look good at all. And I'm sure everyone will talk themselves into it, but in 12 months, but it doesn't look good. And like, if you wait, who knows if you'll be that bad again. But at the same time, like, I'm not the biggest, like, I think Jane Daniels is good. I don't know if you even be there at 3, but like, I'm not sure. I think he should be a 3rd overall pick. Drake May's got his own concerns. McCarthy. I don't know. What do you do with it? It's just a weird spot to be in.
If Drake May's there, I'm drafting Drake May. I can't believe he would be there, though. I would be so shocked if he'd be there. All the smoke says
JJ McCarthy, too.
Might be there, though. But I just see him and Caleb Williams as like, I think they're in a tier of their own, even in good class. And, Daniels, McCarthy, Nix, Penix, those guys are good prospects. They come around almost every year prospects at this point in time. They're not, I don't think, special year-on-year guys that you have to take, especially with this Patriots roster that will be there again next year, right? I think we objectively say after the free agency that this team is still going to be drafting top 3, and for as much as Bill Belichick got hate at the end of his career, he's still a good coach. I don't think you're getting any coaching gains. You might get roster building gains. I mean, hard not to. This roster was so depleted. So they'll be better in that regard, but I don't think this is going to be a team that overperforms anymore the way they traditionally did year on year. So it's a bad team, and you're throwing a quarterback to the worst offensive situation in the NFL. I would trade back. You're going to get a haul for it. It could be, the Vikings, 2 more first-round picks, and maybe another future first-rounder. And if a rookie quarterback starting for a team, as we saw last year with the Panthers, that future first-rounder can be a high pick. So I think you trade back and just say we're so bad that even if we draft, a great quarterback, we're putting him in the worst situation in the NFL, and we're kind of burning through 2 years of his rookie deal just trying to make the situation serviceable. And Jets fans obviously know this. Then you kind of talk yourself into the guy, even if he's underperforming in year 3 and year 4, and be like, oh, he didn't have the talent around him. And sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. And so you're really hamstringing yourself for basically his whole rookie contract if you do draft a guy. Whereas I think this class is good enough, and there's a desperation from teams to trade up enough that you can get a ton of guys to build out this roster. And even with that being the case, you're starting Jacoby Brissett for 17 games next year, and you're drafting top 5, and you're probably getting one next year. So that's where I'm at if I'm the New England Patriots. But we shall see what they end up doing, actually.
Yeah, I just, they can't take Alder Marv, in my opinion. Like, it has to be like,
exactly.
It's either a quarterback or you're trading back. And
yeah,
I don't know if you end up with 11-23, maybe you end up with, I don't know, Knicks, Jackson Powers Johnson, and you have for each of one, and like,
yeah,
you're kind of on your way to like somewhat of some. Although I'm not a huge Knicks guy, but
yeah, I mean, I think like there's a argument to be made that if it's Michael Penix in the second round, that's not a big difference not a massive difference between someone like Jaden Daniels as a prospect or JJ McCarthy as a prospect in terms of like their chances of success at the next level and maybe even high end ceiling. So yeah, I'm with you.
I know this is actually, I don't even want to go down the Jaden Daniels road of like his supporting cast is really good. It makes me a little concerned of like all of a sudden you go from a guy that like, I don't even know where Jaden Daniels was getting drafted 12 months ago to now he's going to go top 3. And he had 2 guys that are going to go in the top 15 in the drafted receiver. He had elite offensive tackles.
Well, I was going to say the thing that not a lot of people talk about, everyone knows the receivers, but they got 2 offensive tackles that might be first rounders in the coming years. Like those were good OTs. They're just young, but those were darn good OTs that he had too.
Yeah. I want to ask you one Aaron Rodgers question. Obviously, again, we kind of joked that you've followed, covered, been at Rodgers' entire career. I don't know how I'm trying to think if I can ask this. Like, what do you make of the first 12 months in New York? And are you surprised? Obviously, again, I'm leaving the injury out of it. I'm talking like a lot of the concerns of media. So the circus that surrounds Rodgers, I don't think it's just quite as big of a circus as ever the people do, but whatever. What do you make of what we've seen so far? And like, what are you expecting going into 24? Are you expecting like this guy who's going to be so motivated? Are you kind of like, yeah, he is, but he's also 40 and we don't know what the Achilles and everything going on around him.
I wouldn't bet against him. I don't, obviously he's not in his prime. Obviously, I think a big part of his game at this point is missing in terms of the scrambling second plays that made him so dangerous, when they won the Super Bowl, when he won a couple of MVPs. But I do think the arm is still live, and he is a guy that this whole year off has only added more fuel to him to want to prove everybody wrong. And so I'm not surprised by the circus. He's always been very outspoken, and it just was kind of like it would not make waves because it was Green Bay and didn't necessarily make national headlines, but he was never a guy who would not say what he thought or hold back from saying anything. It's obviously hilarious now that it's like happening every Tuesday on Pat McAfee, and it makes everyone tunes into it every single week. But it's not going to change how he plays the football field. It's only going to, like I said, drive him more because the guy that's what he uses. He uses the fuel of basically the doubters to make himself better. So yeah, I don't think he's washed by any means. I think he'll be back, and I think if they can put the pieces around him, it's going to be a night and day offense for this team.
Yeah, no, I think my biggest thing with Rodgers, and I'm going to leave it at this, is just like find me like 10 teammates over the 20-year stretch that like don't love the guy. Like there's very few guys, and they're usually guys that are like fringe roster guys. Like I don't know, man. Like all of his
he didn't talk to. It's like
he didn't talk to. Like yeah, like I'm sorry, Romeo Dobbs. Like I apologize, he didn't talk to you. That was like I'm not going to count 2022 Rodgers just because he was kind of checked out. I think he thought he was getting moved. I think the Packers thought they were going to move him at some point. And like Denver literally hired Hackett to like and loaded up on picks to be able to move for him. So obviously appreciate hopping on. There's quite a bit of exciting stuff that should happen over the next month. Make sure you guys are following Mike, and I know he's got some stuff upcoming. So appreciate you as always, and I'll talk to you guys on Thursday. Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports will be on, so make sure you guys are plugged into that as well.